Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Compassion. I'm grateful that you've joined me this morning. Please remember to like and share today's post so that we can get the word out about what God's saying in this hour. Hey, I want to talk about culture over the next few days. I want to talk about how believers can influence culture and how we can affect the culture around us. Now I have a question for you today. How do you faithfully live in a corrupt culture? Let's take a look at Daniel. Daniel lived in captivity. And when the Jews were taken captive to Babylon, Daniel went with them, and he was taken over and over again by nation after nation. And each time he rose to a higher rank within the government, and he had influence on the culture around him. When he was promoted, it says in Daniel chapter 6, verse 4, it says this, it says, "Then the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs. But they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy." Daniel, someone who believed opposite of the cultures that he was in, had great influence over the culture, and he was able to affect it around him. How could he stay faithful like that? There's just three things I want to point out to you about Daniel's life, and you can read through the book of Daniel and you'll see these three things throughout it. But three things that Daniel did that he was able to affect the culture around him. First is this. He was focused more on pleasing God than he was on pleasing man. See, Daniel had a pattern, a way of living. He had a way of seeking God first. He had a way of praying, listening, and meeting God that he established long before the culture tried to influence him the other way. He had already established this pattern of behavior of focusing on God more than he focused on man. And so when the culture corrupted, when the culture became worse, as a matter of fact, when they even got to the point where they made it illegal for him to pray towards Jerusalem, he stood strong. He stood faithful. He stood by what God had already taught him. This is where a lot of believers get in trouble. When we don't make that pattern of behavior, when we don't keep a consistency in it, then it affects us when the culture corrupts. We try to seek God when he's not able to be found because we're in such dire straits. Or we try to seek God when we're in the mess, when we're in the weeds, instead of seeking and making it a pattern of seeking God, making it a common way that we communicate with God. Secondly is this. He understood that respect is earned by being faithful day to day. Daniel had a consistency in his life. Not only did he consistently seek God, but because he had that consistent connection, he had consistent fruit in his life, and that fruit earned him respect. Because when Daniel said something's going to happen, it happened. When Daniel said he was going to do something, he delivered. And this wasn't always in Daniel's power, but because of his relationship with God, he knew how God was going to work through him. Again, this is where believers become in the weeds, where they get into trouble, is this, the inconsistency. We kind of just, I'll try to spend time with God. I can't do this. We become inconsistent in our behavior, and it makes that inconsistent connection with God. Therefore, the fruit in our life is inconsistent. What the world calls that is hypocrisy, and the world has no respect for that. To be consistently earning respect day to day, people have to see the fruit of God in our lives, and that comes from the day-to-day relationship, that constant working of God in our lives. Lastly is this. Daniel understood that gentleness is strength under control. So many people look at someone who is gentle, someone who is humble, someone who is kind as weakness. And there's nothing that could be further from the truth. I think you can just look at our culture to see no further. And that's this. I think we can all agree in the current cultural climate, it takes great strength to remain gentle when confronted with different viewpoints. I mean, look at social media. If you say one thing, it is it is one attack after another. People are ready to jump on anything you do or say. But to respond gently, to respond with respect, has great power. Daniel walked that way. He never walked into the king's court throwing a hissy fit, saying, "You're anti-God, you're anti-this, you're evil this." No, he stepped forward to minister. He stepped forward to be the image of God at any time it was necessary. He stepped forward to be God's emissary when the time came, and he was always ready. He was always consistent, always respectful, and always focused on God. pray this is something that ministers to you today. I pray that it's something that can help you to walk in our culture. God bless you. Have an awesome day.